Okay, so today we're going to learn some heart plumbing, I think, Gary, you had a little bit of this last week. So. Do some heart anatomy and heart plumbing. So we're going to learn some vocabulary that will haunt you for a long time. We're going to learn chambers, vessels, and circuitry. So chambers, these are spaces in the heart. How many chambers in a human heart? 4. All mammals have 4. All right. The wording you're going to use are these 2 words.
Sorry.
You have 2 rooms called an atrium, 2 rooms called a ventricle. Tell me the difference.
Where they go.
Where they go, which is?
In and out.
Very good. An atrium is where you walk into a building. So the atrium is where blood goes in, or you receive blood. So atria receive the blood into the heart. Ventricles therefore pump out. So receive and pump, or in and out, or whatever. So you have 2 ins and 2 outs. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to add the vessel words. Vessels are tubing. What the blood is in. The 2 most screwed up words in biology, besides right and left, are artery and vein. Can someone tell me what an artery vessel does?
An artery takes the blood from the heart to the body, and the vein takes the blood from the body to the heart,
Very good.
And one is oxygen.
No, do not say that. I will scream at you.
Don't put out answers.
Yeah, don't do that.
It really throws me off.
All right, arteries carry away from the heart. It's not color or oxygen. If you say arteries are red, I'm going to flunk you. Arteries go away from the heart. It's the only thing that's true about them. Veins, therefore, go where? To the heart. It has nothing to do with color or oxygen or anything. It's directional. So you can have blue arteries, you can have red veins. That's fine. Direction is important. away. Circuitry, though, we have 2 circuits. These are routes or places you can go. Can someone tell me what pulmonary means?
Lung.
Lung. So my blood is going near or around my lungs. And systemic means what?
All tissues.
Not a lung, right? So we tend to say body, even though yes, lungs are in your body, I get that. Just not a lung.
Okay.
All right? So then your cardiologist is going to put these together and say, okay, I'm going to do surgery in your pulmonary artery. He's billing you $300 to say what? What's a pulmonary artery going to do?
It's a vessel that goes from the heart to the lungs.
Very good. $300. So if you know these 6 words, you can diagnose what doctors say regarding your heart. Because they're just going to use these words in different ways. So to show you that it's important to know that, I'm going to show you a picture. Let me get a screen down. And we're going to look at this picture. I'm going to make it bigger. There's your heart. 4 rooms, 4 chambers, what are you going to call it? And then we're going to start figuring out what the rooms are. So hey, here's a right atrium. Can someone tell me why that's an atrium?
It's
Receiving blood. The arrows tell you blood's going in. But hey, it's not on the left. Anatomical position, right? So you got to be careful in the heart. It's always the patient. So it's the patient's right. I'm receiving blood. There's also a left in over here. So left out here and a right out here. So you have 2 ins and 2 outs. 2 on the right, 2 on the left. Make sense? Those are spaces. Problem is this tubing up here. Here we go. I'm going to put my mouse, my little hand, on this blue thing right there. Is that an artery or a vein?
Artery.
It's blue.
Yeah, but
Still an artery. It's going away from my heart. So color doesn't matter. Where's it going? I don't know. Let's find out. They call it a pulmonary artery. So tell me where that's going. To my lung gland, because they're my lungs, the pulmonary circuit. All right. So tell me why it's blue on that side and red on this side. Right, remember we learned last week on blood. So we have deoxygenated or blue blood, quote. Red means oxygen. So I get air at my lungs. Now my blood, my RBCs are carrying oxygen. So the color just means oxygen. So tell me why this thing over here is a pulmonary vein. From the lung to the heart. So pulmonary means lung, vein means to my heart. So it's going to go into my left atrium, receive, ventricle pump out. Here's a big tube called your aorta. Is that an artery or vein?
Artery.
An artery. Where does it go?
To
Systemic circuit, body, you know, everywhere else we're going to call it. And there I'm going to use the oxygen, so it goes from red back to blue, or oxygenated to deoxygenated. And then I'm going to go back to my heart on this tube, which is a vein called the vena cava, or vena cava, you can say it either way. Makes sense? So you're going to use this language to do that. But what you're going to do now is you're going to be a drop of blood, because on your exam next week, thou shalt be able to do the pathway of blood through the heart, thou shalt. So let's do that, thou shalt. If I were to randomly pick a spot to start, you'd name everything on your route. Let's do that. I'm going to pick somewhere. What should I pick? I know. I'm going to pick the right atrium, because I can. I'm the teacher. What's the next thing you'd go through after you leave a right atrium?
right ventricle.
Right ventricle, because I go from an in to an out. Then where am I going to go after my right ventricle?
To the lung.
How do I get there?
From the pulmonary artery.
Pulmonary artery, because I'm going away from the heart. And where does my pulmonary artery go? To my lungs. Now I gotta get back to the heart for round 2. So how am I gonna get back to the heart from my lungs? Pulmonary vein. So this way. Here's a pulmonary vein. Notice the funny colors I'm using. The pulmonary vein would return it to what room?
Left atrium.
The left atrium, which puts it where? Puts it where?
To the aorta.
Aorta, which sends it where?
To the body.
To my body, or systemic. You can say either way. Now I gotta get back to my heart again. So how am I gonna get back to my heart?
Inferior vena cava.
Vena cava or vena cava. You can say it either way. So if I started you anywhere in this pathway, you can sort of walk your way through. A couple odd things to help you. What side of the heart is the pulmonary side, right or left? When we say pulmonary
It's the
side,
right.
it's the right. So one thing to help you is the right side of the heart is called usually the pulmonary side, because it sends blood where?
To the lungs.
To my lungs. So the right side is your right side lung. Left side goes where?
All over tissue.
Or we say body or systemic. So I remember right side lung, left side body. Right side lung, left side body. That's one thing I remember. And notice the color I chose. The right side is blue because it's deoxygenated. The left side is red because it's oxygenated. Another rule to help you is if you look at the A's and the V's in every word, they alternate. Atrium, ventricle, artery, vein. Atrium, ventricle, artery, vein. Count it with your kids. So you should always have an A followed by a V. You may not remember what they stand for, that's your problem, but you have to have an A and a V alternating as you go through. In, out, away, to. In, out, away, to. Thou shalt be able to do this, thou shalt. So I can pick a random spot and you can figure out how to get all the way around again. Yes?
What's this called?
Double.
Double, I don't know, flow through the heart. There's no magical word for it. I wish there were. Right? Right, how's blood flow? To put this all in perspective, your heart has 2 circuits. The right side does the lung circuit, the left side does the body circuit, and each side has 2 chambers and 2 vessels, basically. And that's your pathway through the heart. Make sense? Okay, so now we have to add some detail. Before I show you some animations. Here's a close-up of the heart. And we're going to focus on these funny white things that you see inside of it. What are those funny white things?
Valves.
Those are valves. So let's take a moment and figure out what valves are for. Can someone tell me why your heart has a valve? Very good. There's lots of reasons, but the primary one is to prevent backflow. Your blood has to go in the order I drew it over there. If it goes backwards, you're dead. So the goal of the valves is to keep the blood going the right way. In plumbing, they call them check valves. Yes?
Is that what people call your heartstrings?
Heartstrings are these little strings, literally attached to the valves, the chordae tendineae. But yeah, they're the same
They
part.
really didn't have heart.
Yes,
then.
chordae tendineae, literally Latin is, Latin string of the heart. Literally. Yeah. But valves are to prevent backflow. So you have two sets of valves. We're going to list each set and then add them to our list. So the first set are called your AV valves. Can anyone guess where they're located? Between the atrium and the ventricle. That's why I call them AV or atrioventriculars. You have two AV valves. One of them is called your tricuspid, and the other one is called your bicuspid. Be advised, there's like 5 different synonyms for these valves. So in biology, we tend to do tri and bicuspid. Zoologists tend to do right and left AVs. Your doctor will probably say mitral for this. They're all the same. I'm just going to pick these. Okay? But they're between my A's and my V's. The tricuspid is on the right side. The bicuspid must be on the left side. So let's add them over here. So on my little flow chart, where's my tricuspid going to go? Between the right atrium and right ventricle. I'm going to put it right here and say tricuspid. That valve is between the two chambers on the right side. Where's my bicuspid? Between the LA and the LV. That's a B. That's a B. Bicuspid. Try on the left. Try on the right. By the left. You try before you buy. It's how we remember it. So the try's on the right as you read. Buy's over there. You try before you buy. Those are the other ones. The other set are called semilunar valves. Because they're half moons, the sun drunk Roman. Right? You have 2 of them. Imagine that. One of them is called your pulmonary valve, or your pulmonary semilunar valve. Can you guess what side the pulmonary valve would be on? They say right?
Right.
Because the right side is the pulmonary side. And therefore, what do you think we call the other one? The aortic. And it's going to be on my left side. Let's figure out where. If you kind of vaguely follow along, the pulmonary valve is going to be right here. Between my right ventricle and my pulmonary artery. My aortic is going to be here. Between my left ventricle and my aorta.
So you're saying we're going to call those are the semilunar stuff?
Yes.
So we go semilunar, pulmonary semilunar.
You can just say pulmonary aortic, but the full name is the pulmonary semilunar valve, or the aortic semilunar valve. It's just a category. In fact, you will see that on this one. This picture just does aortic and pulmonary, but your lab book will say semilunar after those words, which is fine. I mean, it's just a type of valve.
So which way do you want it when you're testing?
If you just gave me these, I'm fine. If you just gave me the A and the B part. I just realize that you'll see different words pop up with the valves. So if we do the first letter, it's a silly thing, but it works. If you do the first letter of the valves, T, P, B, A, you toilet paper Bob's ass. Is how you remember those. Or Betty's ass. I don't care whose ass, but toilet paper, somebody's ass. T, P, B, A. If it's mitral, then it's my ass. So anyway. Okay, doing okay on the valves. One way to remember the valves is they're always after each chamber. So after each chamber, there should be a valve. So after every room, there's a door, is how I remember it in my head. So after the right atrium, there's a valve. After the right ventricle, there's a valve. But there's no chambers until I get all the way to the left atrium valve, left ventricle valve. Then go all the way around to here. So after every room, there's a door. Make sense? So now what we're going to do is we're going to see these parts working. So now what we're going to do is, I'm going to go over there. You have to see this to understand what we're doing next, which is the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle is fancy speak for your heartbeat. How the blood's going through your heart. And there's going to be 3 steps to making your heart go. We're going to do a general step, then we'll make it more specific. The first step is you're going to fill the ventricles. What are you going to fill them with?
Blood.
With blood. Okay. Where do they get the blood that you filled them with?
The atrium.
From the atria. Very good. So I'm getting a different color here. So the first step is we're going to fill the ventricles with blood from the atria. Atria just means the plural of atrium. Okay. Then the second general step is the ventricles are going to contract. Push blood out. So I fill my ventricles first. My ventricles then push the blood out, which is their job, to where? Where's the blood going to go?
Lungs or the body.
The lungs or the body, depending, right? Depending if you're right or left. And then, after I push the blood out, I have to relax the ventricles. And then after they relax or recharge or reset, you pick a word, and we'll go back to here. Load, shoot, score, that's the only way we kind of do it. But you fill, you eject, and you relax, are the three basic steps. What we're going to do now is add a lot of detail to that. Yes, that's why you left all this up. But first, let me show you a picture of that statically, and I'll show you a picture of it animatedly, the word. All right, this is a diagram showing basic steps of a heart here. So here in these first two pictures, we're doing step one. We're filling our ventricles. So if you look at the blue and the red, it represents the blood. Remember, right side is blue because it doesn't have air. Left side is red because it has air. My atria on each side are pushing blood into my ventricles on each side. One thing to keep in your head, even though we draw it as though the blood starts in the right and goes to the left, both sides are pumping at the same time. Right? So the right and the left are both getting filled, ventricular filling. So we're filling the ventricles from our atria. Right? Then, look at these two pictures. What are my ventricles doing in these two pictures?
Pushing it out.
Pushing it out. I'm taking the blood, I'm squeezing the ventricles, and ejecting the blood or pushing it out. My right side goes to my lung, my left side is going to go to my body. And then on these two pictures, what do you notice the ventricles are doing? Relaxing, they're not contracting, they're resetting, recharging. Pick a word you want to use there. And then what do we do after we get to step three? We're going to start back on step one. Right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some vocabulary to this, and we're also going to add these little flaps here. What were those little flaps again? Those are the valves. So I want you to look at these pictures here. I'm going to give you actually a better picture to look at, which is this one I just lost somewhere in my. Where'd it go? I lost it. I know it's here. There it is. Went over it. This is going to show you some valving. Here's my trium bicuspid. Here's my pulmonary aortic. So, what are the trium bicuspid valves doing in this picture?
Letting it into the
They're opening. Why would they need to be open?
So that the blood can drain.
Like go through. What did they do here? Why would they need to close?
Back forward.
Very good. So the logic you're going to have to get in your head as we go through this is while the heart's pumping the blood, the valves have to open and close to keep the blood in the right place. So part of the cardiac cycle is now putting the valves and what they're doing over the chambers. Right? So what we're going to do is go back to that picture I just showed you, and we're going to put together the chambers and the valves together. Let's do step one. We're filling our ventricles from blood from the atria. So now we're going to talk about the chambers and the valves. Leave some space. They need a whole board over here, probably. Okay, and step number one, we're filling the ventricles with blood from the atria. So I'm going to break number one down here. I'm going to throw some wording at you. Step number one of the things the book will say is you have atrial systole. Doctor word. Can someone tell me what systole or systole means? Not all at once now.
Isn't that the systolic blood pressure?
Yes, it means to contract or to push. So in English, my atria are contracting. They're pushing blood where? Into my ventricles. So I have atrial systole to fill my ventricles with blood. They're pushing the blood down to my ventricles. Look at this picture here. Another word this picture used was contraction, which is perfectly fine. But this is atrial systole. I'm squeezing my atria to push blood into my ventricles. What do my valves have to do to get the blood from my atria to my ventricles?
Open.
Which valves are those?
Tricuspid, tri and
Tri and bicuspid. So 1B, the tri and bi have to open to let the blood in. So I squeeze with my atria, and I open the doors to let the blood into my ventricles. That's all happening in number 1. Make sense? All right, draw a line here. So I push in, I squeeze the blood down, I have to open the doors. They will be closed. Now, let's go to step 2. Step 2, you said the ventricles push blood out. Give me a doctor word to say ventricles squeezing or contracting. Ventricular systole. So my ventricles are contracting, squeezing, whatever word you want to use, in step 2. That's how they're pushing the blood out. Tell me what my tri and bicuspid valves are going to do in this picture when my ventricles squeeze. They close. Why do they have to close? Otherwise, you just went back to number 1 and you're pointless. You're dead, right? So for this to work, I now have to close the tri and bicuspids. They have to close, otherwise the blood would just go backwards and you just die. That has a sound. Does anyone know the official doctor word for the sound of the tri and bicuspid? That's love. That is doctor speak. When you hear your heartbeat, you're hearing the closing of the valves in each round. So the love sound, the first heartbeat or auscultation, is that one. But wait, we're not done. Look at my picture. Where's the blood going? How to get out? Are there valves in the way?
Yeah.
Very good. So the pulmonary and the aortic valves have to do what? Have to open, because otherwise the blood wouldn't get out. So we shut one door and we open another. Sounds philosophical, doesn't it? So I shut my tri and bicuspid so the blood can't go in reverse. I open my semilunars so the blood can get out into my arteries. Make sense? Now let's go to step 3. When I relax my ventricles, can anyone think of a doctor way to say relax? Diastole. So number 3A would be ventricular diastole or diastole. That means to relax or to expand or not contract, pick a word. So my ventricles are getting bigger.
How did you say the word again?
Diastole,
No, the one before it, the adjective before it, ventricular,
ventricular.
ventricular, diastole.
So my ventricles can get larger or diastole or however you want to do it. So let's look at my valves again. Between the picture on the left and the pictures on the right, tell me what changed.
Everything's closed.
Who closed?
All the valves.
These ones did, right? They're open here.
The pulmonary and aortic.
Very good. The pulmonary and the aortic valve have to close. So we got the B here. The pulmonary and the aortic valves have to close. Why would they have to close?
So it won't go back.
Otherwise the blood would just come back in, right? And what sound is that?
Done.
That's dub. Or dub. You'll hear both. So love dub are the 2 sets of valves closing.
I have a
Step 2 and step 3. Yes.
So when it closes, does it create pressure to push the blood through?
Not the valve. In
Not
fact,
the
it's
valve?
reversed. The pressure of the blood coming backwards shuts them.
Oh, okay.
So when the blood wants to return, the valve shut. All right, so my ventricles are getting bigger. I shut the doors. And then we're back. Oh wait, there's one more step in here somewhere. Look back at 1A. What did my atria do in 1A? Contracted. What happens with muscles once they contract? They have to do something else eventually. Okay, so now we got to put that in here. So where do my atria do diastole?
3C.
At number 2. So we're going to add another step to number 2. Atrial diastole. So that'd be a D. So I contract my atria in 1. I contract my ventricles in 2 while relaxing my atria. And then in 3, I just relax my ventricle. And now I'm back. Okay. So I'm going to leave this up here, because now we're going to do it on the screen one more time. I'm going to show you an animation one more time. Let's do this. So here are my cardiac cycle phases. So number 1, ventricular filling. In English, I'm putting blood in my ventricles. From where? From my atria. So they're contracting. How's it getting in? I'm opening the doors of my tri and bicuspid valves. Then I'm going to contract my ventricles, or ventricular systole. Notice the phrasing here. The atria are in diastole, meaning relaxing. I'm going to squeeze on my ventricles. The blood can't go back because I just shut the doors behind them. Therefore, the other valves have to open, the pulmonary aortic. Mom told you we leave the room, shut the doors. When the blood leaves the atria, I close the door. When I leave the ventricles, I'm now going to shut the door. In level 3, ventricular diastole, my ventricles are going to relax. I shut the door to keep the blood in the body and the lungs, and I hear a dub, and I restart. So in the cardiac cycle, you have chambers and valve and blood all moving as a unit, hopefully, if everything's going well. Now I'm going to show you is an animation of that process. Hopefully it works. It did earlier.
When your ventricles are distally
Uh-huh.
and the tri and the bi are closed,
Yes.
well, while they're resting, do those 2 valves open up again? Or do they stay closed and give the ventricles really attached to it?
They stay closed until the atria contract,
Okay.
basically. So we're going to walk through an animation of this cardiac cycle. So again, this is reviewing our valves. Here's my pulmonary aortic. Again, there's more than one word for all these, so don't freak out that they're saying left AV. Just remember that's a bicuspid. And that's just the way they do it. But here are my valves. And here are my 3 phases that are over there. Ventricular filling, ventricular systole or ejection, and then relaxation of my ventricles. Okay. So we're going to put green blood. He's Vulcan, I guess. So we're going to put green blood in there. All right, so here I am basically in step 1. Step 1, what should the blood be doing? Going from where to where? From my atria to my ventricle through an open door, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So I'm filling my ventricles with blood from my atria, right? And now I'm going to use atrial systole, atrial contraction, squeezing, pick a word. I've now put more blood into my ventricles. Then once I fill my ventricles, I'm going to do ventricular systole or ejection or contraction or pick a word. Let's do that. Hey, what happened? The blood didn't leave yet.
Yeah.
But something else happened. Let's do that again. What happened right there at my mouse? Who's closing? The tri and bicuspid have to close, otherwise your blood would just go in reverse. So as you squeeze, you slam the door. That prevents the blood from leaving that way. And that's going to force the blood to go which way? Out the other ones. So basically you force the door open to leave out the pulmonary aortic. So you slam the door behind you, check valve, and then you get forced out that valve. So now I did ventricular systole to my lungs if it's on the right, or to my body if it's on the left. Then, we gotta keep going. Now I'm gonna start relaxing or diastole of my ventricles. What should I see my valve do up there? Let's see. It did. Otherwise, the blood would just get sucked in your heart and you've got nothing. So as the blood wants to come back, I shut those doors. Duh. And then, I'm gonna keep relaxing. And then I start over again. I'm going to refill. Load, shoot, score. Fill, eject, relax. However you want to phrase it. But again, you're combining the chamber and the blood and the valve working together.
Is there a minimum amount of time that there's that rest period for the ventricle?
There should be, yes. The longer the better, yes.
So this is happening in both the right and left side
Yes.
of the heart simultaneously?
Yes. Yeah, so unfortunately in all the pictures you usually just see one side or the other, but both sides work together as a team. What am I doing? The atrial diastole? Yeah. That would be, so here I just filled my ventricle, so I contracted. This is basically A, 1A. Then, if you watch, it's subtle. You just saw it right there. It's very subtle. I'll replay it. That little bit in the atria, that was the diastole. It's buried in the ventricular systole. So you won't see it. It's such a small thing. But every time the ventricle contracts, that gets a little bit less. They alternate. Basically, one fires, the other one fires. They kind of do this kind of thing. It's like a piston pump. So now, let's do this. Okay, we're going to do a bunch of graphs about the heart. You don't have to write these graphs on a test, although it's cool if you can. What's important is that you understand what the graphs are showing you. If you understand the graphs, you understand how this stuff works. I want to do graph by graph by graph. But what we're going to do is try to figure out what the graph is showing us. This graph is of my atria. It shows left, but it would also be the right. And what I want to do is right there. When my pressure is increasing in my atria, what is the atria doing to make the pressure go up? Contracting, squeezing, systole, pick a word you like. But that graph is showing my atria are squeezing on the blood and raising the pressure. So the blood should be going from where to where?
From the atria to the ventricle.
From my atria to my ventricles. That's step one. I'm squeezing my atria to get the blood to my ventricles. So this graph in pinky, whatever that is representing me doing 1A, basically. Okay.
Even though it's from the atrium, we're calling it ventricular.
It fills the ventricles.
It fills the ventricles, but it's not ventricular systole, it's atrial pressure. So now look at the yellow graph. That's my ventricular pressure. So I want you to notice two things. Look at the size of the graph. Is it more or less than the atrium? More, so more pressure. Why would a ventricle have more pressure than an atrium?
It's bigger.
Bigger. Why does that have to be bigger? Yeah, good old Wolf's Law, right? Negative feedback. If I need to go all the way to your little toe, I need to push harder than going 1 inch down in your heart. So the ventricles have a lot more pressure. They're bigger because they have a bigger trip, right? But notice when it occurs. Look at it compared to the atrial graph.
Relaxes.
Yeah.
So is it when the valves are closed, how the pressure gets built?
Yeah, basically, yeah, you squeeze the valve shut, and then you're just squeezing a balloon, so the pressure goes way up. So yeah, so my atria contracted first, that filled my ventricles, then my ventricles contract second, right? Atria, fill, eject, right? Make sense? So fill, eject. All right, try this graph on for size. Okay, probably hard to see, it's right by that yellow one there. But there's a red graph that represents the aortic pressure. That the aorta is a vessel, right? It's an artery. So I want you to look at the shape of that graph and see what does it, why is it superimposed in the yellow? What does that tell you?
That as the ventricle contracts, it increases the pressure in the aorta.
Very good. So think of where arteries come away from the heart. So as my ventricle contracts, it's going to push blood into my arteries at the same pressure as it's pushing in the heart. Right? That tube is connected right to your heart, so it should have the same pressure. So yes.
When we're saying when pressure rises in ventricles, we would say it shoots
Blood into the arteries.
blood, so it goes to the arteries.
Yep. That's just saying that's putting blood into my tubes at high pressure, or arteries.
Pressure rises in the aorta.
So here comes the harder one now. This graph seems to throw people for a loop. This is ventricular volume, not pressure. This is size. All right, so now let me walk you through the obvious one. When the graph goes down, that means the ventricle's getting smaller. What is the ventricle doing if its size is smaller?
Moving the blood out.
It's squeezing or systole or contracting, right? So if you look at this graph here, as my ventricles get smaller, the pressure should go exactly, right? In fact, it took away my, we used to have a yardstick. We can do it this way. If you line them up, oh, that doesn't work, does it? Right. Okay. I went to teacher school, I did. All right. It doesn't work. Take your fingers and you'll notice that those two mirror each other. So as I'm squeezing my ventricles, the pressure has to rise. So now, as this graph goes up in volume, what's the ventricle doing? It's relaxing, expanding, growing bigger. My pressure should decrease because that's what I'm doing. I'm relaxing and filling the ventricle. So the volume and pressure are the reverse. As I squeeze, the pressure goes up. As I expand, the pressure goes down. Yes.
So the pressure as it goes up is being filled.
Exactly.
As you squirt the water out.
Yep.
That's where it's going.
Then you get this flabby balloon that has less pressure in it. Exactly. So systole makes my ventricle get smaller. Diastole makes my ventricle get bigger. Right. Now comes the harder part. This little where my mouse is pointing. Look at this little bump right here. I love this little bump. It's so fun. What does that tell you size-wise? What did my ventricle just do there? Got bigger. Why is it bigger there?
Because the valve.
Is that right before it closes?
Like, you have to like get to your biggest size before you can squeeze to your smallest.
Very, very close. Right, let's look at where it is time-wise. This is occurring here. What happened right where my finger's pointing?
It's contracting.
Who was contracting?
Atrial.
The atria were contracting. And what did the atria do? They
Push out.
fill the ventricles. So if I push blood in my ventricles should get bigger, right? That's actually a very important little bump. It's so important it has its own name and a law attached to it. You are going to learn Starling's law of the heart. EMTs live by this. Right? At least they say they do. Let's learn the Starling law of the heart. There's also another guy's name stuck with it. I never remember the other guy, so he's out of it. Starling's law. Here's what Starling said. This is just like Wolff's law. It's the same rule. If you expand heart muscle. Okay, so tell me what would expand a heart muscle.
Blood.
More blood, right? So we can do e.g. more blood in. I can't write anymore today. I'll just do it. So in other words, if I can fill my heart more, if I can stretch my muscles, what should the muscles do? If you stretch a muscle, it should
Push back.
snap back more. So the heart muscle contracts harder, stronger. Right? The easy way to remember Starling's law, they call this the rubber band effect. All right, go home, get a rubber band. The more you stretch it, the more it what?
Control.
Snaps and hits your hand harder, right? The same law here. If I fill my heart, it'll want to contract harder, squeeze harder. You're stretching it out so it snaps back. That's Starling's law of the heart. So let's look at number 1 over there again. What am I doing to my ventricles? I'm filling them. So if I can fill them more than normal, I'm stretching them, what will my heart do? I get that much more contraction out of the same chamber. So I'm causing my heart to expand more so it snaps back harder. That actually has a name, that little spot. This is called preloading your heart. So in preloading, you're increasing the ventricle filling. Yes?
I'm just wondering in relation to this, if is there any sort of vacuum effect that happens, like?
On the diastole there is.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, so when they relax, you get a little bit of vacuum because it's a sealed pipe, but majority is the systole, yes.
So this is the systole part of the contraction.
Yes, of the
So
atrium.
that's the top number of the blood
Yes.
pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're
they
pushing
say
hard.
so they say that's environmental rather than like
Can be.
it can be affected by like stress or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So sympathetic nervous system tells that to expand more. Right? Yes?
You had mentioned that the volume was innate.
Yes. That's called the preload spot. Also called the atrial kick. Also called the Starling spot. Also called, there's another word for it. Atrial kick, I think, is one. Preload, Starling spot. There's one more. But that little bump is basically you trying to get the heart to expand more than normal. So it'll snap back harder than normal. So my little arrow there is pointing to a preload or a Starling event or whatever you want to call it, or atrial filling. They're all the same concept. You're trying to get my ventricles bigger than normal so they'll snap back harder than usual. How's that for phrasing? So, my atria's job is to fill and preload my ventricles. My ventricles then get smaller, systole, raising their pressure. They get relaxing or diastole, lowering the pressure, and we do it again. Right? So if we keep playing that.
That little Starling bump is just before the contraction?
Yes, it's during step 1. So just before step 2. You okay on that size thing? Preloading? Now comes the harder one.
What's happening in step 1 that allows the extra?
That's the atrial systole. The atria actually contract. So if your atria don't contract, blood will still fill the ventricle, but it won't be extra blood. So you will lose the Starling effect.
So it's almost like at its strongest contraction point,
Yes.
that it's like increasing that
Yes.
volume? Okay.
It's like you're blowing up a balloon and you just give an extra breath at the end.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're doing. Okay, so the last graph you're going to be looking at is that one at the very top, which is your ECG or electrocardiogram or EKG when I learned it, different spelling. So to understand that graph, you have to understand the EKG. So what we're going to do is first figure out the wiring of the heart. So this is showing the fancy words intrinsic conduction system. No, you don't have to know that phrase. But if you understand medical terminology, these are nerves that are within the heart. Your heart has its own wiring system. And these are the parts that wire or neurologically control your heart. So they have some fancy names. We're going to focus on the two that say node more than anything else. So you have some wires in your heart. And what I'm going to do is show you them in action. So with your left eye, look at the picture on the left, and with your right eye, try to read the thing on the right. The little gray balls are not anatomically correct. They're not really in there. Okay. Those are representing nerve signals. So if you watch the little balls, you watch the nerve signals, there's a pattern to how they go in the heart. So we're first got to figure out where they start and where they go. So where do the nerve signals start?
At that node up at the top.
Right up here. And that has a name.
SA node?
That's your SA node. So on this board, we're going to list out the pathway of the intrinsic conduction system, or this wiring system, and start doing some names over. Choose black and green. Okay, let's go through this pathway. So I'm going to call this my conduction system, or you can say the wiring system, or intrinsic conduction system. I don't care what you call it. So we're going to start in that one in the upper right of the heart. That's called your SA node. All right. If you don't like the word SA node, a perfectly valid synonym is called your pacemaker. Can anyone tell me the job of a pacemaker?
Tell your heart when to go.
Base.
Tells your heart when to go. That's the computer, in quote, in the heart that tells it now, 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 now. If you're in a car, there's a computer that tells your spark plugs when to fire. It's the same logic. Yes?
So would a pacemaker, like the actual chip,
Uh-huh.
be implanted near that area?
They don't. What they do is they plant it higher up in the chest, where it's under the skin, but they have a wire that goes down that spot. So you can change the battery without having to open the chest. Yeah, the idea is you have to touch that part. Right, so here's our pacemaker. So the pacemaker sends an impulse down some of these wires, which we don't worry about, to that. Who or what is that thing there? That's an AV node. So we'll put our number 2 for our system is the AV node, atrioventricular node. The AV node then sends a signal down all this magical wiring here, right? And we're going to call those, we'll call those today, Purkinje fibers. Again, I'm leaving a few of the parts out, but you get the gist. So my SA node goes first to my AV node. My AV node then sends it down these fibers, right? And there's some other parts. But now we've got to figure out what the heart is doing when these things are going. So I want you to look at that picture on the left. When the SA node sends its message, when it depolarizes, what chamber does what? Very good. So normally, when your SA node depolarizes, that should cause atrial systole. In a normal healthy heart, when my pacemaker fires or depolarizes, my atria are told to contract. In a normal healthy heart. Okay, my AV node, if you watch, there's a pause. So the AV node has a pause, and then sends a signal down those wires. And when the Purkinje fibers get a signal, what does my heart do? What chamber does what?
The ventricles contract.
How do we say that in doctor speak?
Ventricular systole.
Close enough. All right. So when my SA node fires, my atria contract. My Purkinje fibers get the message from my AV node. My ventricles contract. So then I want you to look now. What did my heart just do? What did it just do there? Who was depolarizing then? What node was firing to make it relax? None of them. Right, so that's the trick, is when the wiring is firing, I'm contracting, and then when the wire is done, I'm told to relax. Right? So the nerves are telling the heart when to contract, and basically, when I don't send a signal, I'm relaxing.
So it basically only responds to the being
Yes.
stimulated by the
Default is off.
AV.
Yeah.
So the AV node doesn't just pauses.
This is the pause, yeah.
Is it accurate the way this is displayed that the atrium don't contract until the signal has reached the AV node? Or is
Yeah,
that-
what happens is this signal between here and here is faster than the atrium can contract, that's why there's a pause.
Okay.
So I'm pausing to give you time to finish contracting, and then before I fire the next one, yeah.
So by the time when it finishes it with 3, then the nerves are done sending their
Yes.
signals, so then it goes into relaxation.
Basically, yes.
Just diastole.
Yes.
Okay.
So now what we're going to do is add that to this picture. Doctors like letters, and so they assign letters to the waves created by the nodes and the wiring. So when they hook the thing on your chest, they're taking a measurement of the conduction system. So now we're going to assign those letters to these parts. So the P wave, the first one, that bump there, it says atrial depolarization. So in English, which thing here makes a P wave? The SA node. Hence, P is for pacemaker. So the P wave is when the SA node is telling your atria to contract. So now look at the QRS. It's always a unit. Where's the QRS falling in my conduction system?
And when it contracts, when the AV contracts the ventricle.
Very good. So the step 2 and 3 basically are the QRS complex. That's where my AV node goes down to my Purkinje fibers and tells them to contract my ventricles. So my P is step 1. QRS is basically kind of 2 and 3 combined.
Do we call QRS a wave?
It's a wave or a complex or a wave.
But QRS is sufficient?
Yep, QRS is perfectly fine with me. But now notice, there's one more wave on there. Where's T wave? Very good. You're going to add a T wave down here. And that's when the ventricles are in diastole, which means what again? Relax. Even though the nerves aren't firing, it makes a blip on a screen, and so they call it a T. But it's not a node or a fiber. It's just a relaxation event. Right? Remember your nerve physiology, when you relax, you still have potassium moving, right? So we have P, QRS, and T. So now we're going to take these words here, the letters, and put them over there. Yes. So tell me, during the P wave, what part of the cardiac cycle should be occurring? 1, 2, or 3?
One.
Very good. Your P wave represents the electricity to tell your atria to fill your ventricles in a normal, healthy heart. What should QRS be doing? Which step is QRS in control of?
Ventricle 2.
Very good. So step 2 of our cardiac cycle is the QRS. QRS tells my ventricles to push. My ventricles are pushing in step 2. What wave tells my ventricles to relax? T is step 3. My ventricles are being told to do diastole by firing. So you have 3 letters, groups of letters on your EKG because you have 3 steps to the heart. P tells them to do step 1, QRS tells them to do step 2, and T tells them to do step 3. The electrical system, ECG, tells the heart what to do. Yes?
What stimulates the SA node?
It is self-stimulating. It will beat on its own without you. You can take your heart out of your chest and put it in a jar, and it will beat on its own.
So it's not attached to the whole nerve?
Nope, your vagus nerve can influence it. The SA node is what's called autorhythmicity. It'll beat on its own. So you don't need a head to actually have a heartbeat if the heart can get blood. It'll just sit there. The horror movies with this beating heart on the shelf, it's true. So, yeah, don't run that through. So your sympathetic and parasympathetic can tell the SA node to speed up and slow down, but you can't. It'll do its own thing. Yes.
So that's why we cut the head off of the chicken
Yeah.
until it runs out of blood.
Right. And the blood keeps squirting out until there's no blood. Yeah. The heart doesn't need you, it just needs you to tell it what to do. It doesn't need you to beat. So intrinsic. Yes.
So 1 and 2 are the depolarization, and then
Yes.
3 is when it's
Repolarizing.
repolarizing, so it's hyperpolarization.
Right. So let me walk you through this picture here. So again, with one eye, look at the thing on the left. With the other eye, look at the thing on the right. Bless you. I mean, your third eye, read the word. So that again is showing the wiring in yellow, telling my heart in gray what to do. And this is what the doctor would see on the tracing of the ECG on your chest. So when the SA node fires or depolarizes, I should get a P wave blip, and that tells my atria to go in step 1 to fill my ventricles. When the AV node and the Purkinjes go next, I should see a QRS complex, which tells my ventricles it's time to squirt the blood out in step 2 and shut the valve. And then when nobody's doing anything in particular, that shows up as a T wave. The doctor would realize that means my ventricles are relaxing, I'm shutting off the pulmonary aortic valve, and I'm going to do it again. So the electrical system and the mechanical system are working together normally. So if we go back to the charts of doom, so my T wave, first bump, means my atria contracted or increased pressure, which filled my ventricle. QRS tells my ventricles to contract, raising their pressure, and told them to get smaller. That's what systole means. T wave was when everyone told to relax. My ventricles should lose pressure because they're getting bigger. I do that again. So electrical, mechanical, blood. That's how this is all working. And if you listen to the sound, those are the valves closing during the appropriate time. So they would close here for lub, they'd close there for dub at each round. So if you do all 4 now, with all 4 of your eyes, walk this. So again, I'm not going to ask you to reproduce these graphs, but if you can walk through line by line and sort of understand this is getting bigger for the pressure's doing this, the valve is doing this. So if you want to do all that on that board, in your head, but graphically, that's what you want to do eventually. Yes?
So if your QRS is not as going as high, would that be an electrical problem, a pressure problem, or a volume problem?
If the QRS is messed up, it would be an electrical problem directly, but then it would cause all that other stuff, because my ventricles aren't getting the right signal, they may not contract as hard or as often, and therefore my blood wouldn't have this pressure. That's why the doctor's supposed to check your EKG, that kind of tells what the computer's saying to the muscles. And then, so if your computer's messed up, everything's going to be messed up.
It would be just the pressure's messed up, not the computer.
Yes, and so if your EKG's fine, but you have bad pressure, that means it's not the computer, it's the heart or the blood vessels, the valve, or something
And
else.
is that primary versus secondary?
Yes, kind of the same idea. So, for example, you can have a valve problem, which is a murmur. The computer's fine, it's just your valves aren't closing, so you're going to get bad circulation. The doctor would hear the murmur, because the lub-dub would be off, but your EKG would be fine. So that would say, well, it's not your heart wiring, it's your heart plumbing. If the wiring's bad, then it's probably going to be the wiring and the plumbing would end up being bad, but not necessarily.
What does the ECG stand for?
ECG, that's a G, electrocardiogram. EKG, yes?
Is there somewhere on that EKG that shows the atrial dystole?
It's buried in right there when that graph goes down.
But you can't see it on the EKG.
The EKG, it's in the QRS complex. It's just buried in there. So if I show you, let's see, which picture was it? Yeah, we can show this picture here first, and then I'll show you this next picture. It's just kind of running you through the EKG. So here's my P wave in green. My atria get the message that tells them to contract. Here's my QRS complex. My ventricles are getting the message to contract. Here's my T wave. Everybody's told to turn off, and that will tell my heart what to do. If I go to, where's the one I want to show you? This one. This is a static picture of exactly what we did. So here are my lub-dubs. Here's my EKG or ECG, if you want to call it that. And this is showing atrial systole, right? There's the atrial diastole right here. It's just buried under the ventricle, so you never see it in real life. It's just buried in there. Right? Here's my pressure. Here's my artery. Here's my volume. Here's my valves. The whole enchilada. So draw this in your spare time, or find it in your book, and we will walk through, if I randomly told you in a test, okay, your ventricles are filling, what valve is open, what valve's closed, what EKG is it? Just be able to put all that in one big ugly package. So that has been warned, that'll happen. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the EKG a little bit, and do one more little bit with it. All right, so this is just a little blur here about ECGs, EKGs. So now I'm going to give this person a left bundle branch block, which in English means I'm going to fry the wire over there. So now your nerve has been damaged in your heart. How could you damage a nerve in a heart? How could you do that? What is it? It could be electrical damage, could be infection, could be a knife wound in a bar. Right? It could be myopathies. There's lots of potential way to kill off nerves. Right? Okay, so let's say your nerve is bad, like that. What do you notice about the heart contraction? Still contracting. It's about speed, though.
Slower.
Seems slower, doesn't it? Why would it be slower when I fry some wires?
Because you don't have to send that other message to.
Yeah, no.
That's right. So go back to 231, right? I'm making the nerves less conductive, right? They're not as fast. Also, the heart has to beat as a unit. So even though the right side's fine, the left side is stalling, I gotta wait for the left side. So everybody slows down for the slow kid, right? So I have to wait for that side there. So on an EKG, what would the doctor see to say, by the way, you were in a fight in a bar and damaged your heart? Let's see. I'll give you a hint. This is normal. P, QRS, and T. So you're looking at either option 1 or option 3. Which of those would best represent that patient? Option 3 is the best answer. How did you know that was this patient?
It takes longer.
Black. Yeah, look at the width on this. So that means in English, it's taking longer to go through your ventricles than it does normally. The P's fine, the T's kind of okay, just that signal's taking longer to travel through the scarred heart. So a wide QRS complex tells the doctor your ventricles are not contracting as well, or as quickly, or as responsively. Right? What's wrong with person 1?
It's too fast, and there's no
The P.
P.
There's no P. Therefore, you don't have a,
Signal?
and therefore the doctor's going to give you a, that's the logic. But your heart's still beating because, remember, these are automatic. They'll keep beating without you. It's just they're going to beat. The doctor can see that your pacemaker is not working. So an EKG can tell a doctor a lot about the wiring of your heart. So they can spot problems ahead of time, hopefully. Right? Make sense? Yes?
Does aerobic exercise,
Yes.
that only strengthens the heart muscle, it doesn't have an effect on the electrical system? Is that
Not
correct?
directly.
Okay.
But the better your blood flow and the less cholesterol, the better your heart will be tolerant of ischemia. But yeah, it won't affect if you can still get stabbed in a bar. That's not going to change that. Right? Not that I get stabbed in a bar is a lot. Right.
It wouldn't directly affect.
It wouldn't affect the nerves directly. Yes. Jessica.
Where does an arrhythmic
Okay, I gotta stop.
come into play?
Ah, let me show you that. Hold on.
Big concern.
Hold on. I'm looking.
Just reserve your blood.
Yeah. Okay, I don't work for these people. I'm not getting a dime. Okay, so I'm not trying to sell you something in the lobby. But here's a nice little website called practicalclinicalskills.com. You're not required to go there. I'm not doing this as a sales pitch. But as though many of you will be in healthcare, you are required to take an EKG courses in your nursing and PA careers. So one of the things you may want to do is get a handle on how the electrical system varies if you're screwed up, right? So if we go down and do some practice drills, for example, we can go through and do...
Can we get this site?
Yeah, it's on the, I just Googled it, right? So there's different parts, P, QRS, and T. And what the site does really well is kind of walk you through what to look for. I'm not going to ask any of this on an lecture exam about the QRS intervals and all that. But you want to get a handle on, does that look normal to everybody? So the key with an EKG is, does it look okay? If it looks weird, that means something's wrong with you. So let's try that. So here's somebody's EKG. Your first thing is does that look okay compared to a normal person? That looks a little strange, right?
It's dipping down.
Right, so you're catching on that if you try finding P, QRS, and T, I think that's the P. Here's a QRS, that's a weird looking whatever, and then what is that? Right? So you caught on that this is not a normal EKG, and that's basically all you have to do in this class at this point is realize that that's not an okay thing, see a doctor, right? You can do the same thing with your P waves, and you can say, well, that looks weird, right? So they do a good little blurb of teaching you the basics of, this is called a 2-to-1. Your pacemaker had to fire twice to get your ventricles to listen. So go, you know, that's what it's doing. It's trying to get your heart to fire. But if you walk through this, they'll walk you through lots of different possibilities. A lot of these are really medical, like there you're dying, right? That's me, right? You're dead. Yeah. But if you walk through it, the key you want to look at is, are my P, QRS, and T's roughly the right shape, in the right place? If they're not, then something's wrong with the wiring, which means something's going to be wrong with your pumping, because the heart obeys that.
So can you show us normal again?
Yes. Normal, they put... They do have normal. I'm trying to remember what they call it.
Wow, isn't that cool?
It's not normal. It's
Normal sinus.
yeah. It should be. Where is it? There it is. Yeah. Normal sinus.
Okay,
So here's P, QRS, T. They're all upright. They're all narrow, and there's no extra blub and whatnot.
So
That's,
T is the little.
T is the tent at the back. But the trick is, I see all three in every wave. You know, now one thing about the human heart, right, varies a little bit because of breathing and stress and all that. So the fact that they're speeding up and slowing down is not a problem. What matters is the shape doesn't change. So my heart's going bump, 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 bump. That's perfectly fine. Right? So normal, everything looks good. If you then go back and, let's see, how do I get back? Go back. Let's give you something really weird.
So if supraventricular time.
Yeah.
That one looks good.
If during the T wave, the ventricles relax, why does the wave go up?
Because it's measuring the potassium, so the potassium is still moving. Even though the ventricles are relaxing, you're repolarizing. So it comes up electrically as a signal. Even though there's a... Yeah, so you can catch on that this is not normal, right? Yeah, this is supraventricular. In English, above your ventricles, something's going really fast. Right? So that's a QRS, and so fast you actually don't have a P or a T. You're just bang, 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 like that.
It's upside down.
And the T is weird. T10's up there.
So what causes that?
Usually some kind of weird myopathy thing. But all these can be due to scarring, infection. But so I'm just saying, plug, if you have some spare time and you're just bored to death on Sunday or whatever, go here and just get a feel for how the EKGs tell you different things. Right? It's all that because in labs, this week you're going to take your own EKG and interpret it. So you're going to look for, is it normal looking or bad? I'm not a doctor, I cannot diagnose you, but I can tell you need to see somebody. Right? So now while we've done EKGs, yeah, you look abnormal, I can tell you that. It's always nice to people like that.
Today would be really slow. It would just be like.
Yes.
I know that.
Okay, let's go back to this. One more little thing to add to your life. Here's our intrinsic conduction system, right? The wiring in the heart. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go chemically how these nodes and those muscles talk to each other. So I told you how the system works, but now we're going to hit you with two words here. This is histology. So, the yellow cell is one of those nerve node Purkinje, one of those things. The red cells are the muscle of the chambers. And we're going to use two words to hit you with. One is autorhythmic cell, and one is contractile cell. Autorhythmic in English means what? Self-rhythm. That's a node, right? So in English, this is the nerve cell in your heart. This is the one that's going to tell the heart what to do. What do contractile cells do? They're the muscle cells. So if you remember biology 231 in histology, you had all these little intercalated discs. Remember those? That's how these cells are all going to talk to each other, is when the autorhythmic cell sends a signal, like P wave, the atria muscles can hear it via the intercalated discs, so it can work as a unit. Right? So this is going to walk us through how the nerve cells and the muscle cells actually communicate. So what you're going to do is have to go back to 231 and remember positive and negatives. In a nerve cell, what did negative mean?
There was less potassium inside.
Very good. It meant there's less ions inside, right? And positive meant there's more ions outside. And so when we depolarize, the charge is flipped. And then when we repolarize, we put that, right? Is that vaguely ring a bell? I can change your final grade at any time. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to walk back through neurons. Here's my autorhythmic cell. Here's my channels in my membrane you learned in 112. And we have a sodium channel like nerves. We have a potassium channel. Hey, here's a calcium channel. Why not?
Right now.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to make the autorhythmic cell fire a signal, or depolarize, or initiate an action potential, whatever word you want to use. Okay, we're going to send a signal. So it tells me to click a sodium channel. What should go through a sodium channel?
Sodium.
Okay, if this were a neuron, which way would the sodium, would it go in or out? It goes going in. So on my graph 231, that you remember from your final, if sodium goes into my neuron, this graph should go up because I'm gaining charge, right? Let's see how smart you are from 231. I taught you well. Indeed. Sodium enters my neuron, my graph goes up, or becomes less negative. Remember that phrasing? Right. It's the exact same thing as neurons. Now, it tells me, click a calcium channel. That's new.
Very high.
So calcium came in, making me, again, gain charge. So, I see some lists of numbers I'm going to put on the board, I think. Let's start doing a list of these steps that thou shalt know of the autorhythmic and contractile cells. I'm going to put it over here. So over here, we're going to talk about the autorhythmic cell. If you don't like that word, you can say a node. I mean, I don't care how you phrase it. So this is the nerve cell in the heart. So step one, when I depolarized, what was the first thing I did? What channel opened?
Open the sodium channel.
Open a sodium channel, or Na channel, I'll put. And that makes sodium go where?
Inside.
In. So sodium comes into my cell. My graph goes up, right? All right. Then in step two, I click the what?
Calcium.
I'm going to open a calcium channel. And that lets calcium go where? Into a cell. And when I do 1 and 2, we've made the cell depolarize. So unlike neurons, remember neurons was just sodium, but in heart muscle it's sodium and calcium to make a depolarization, which is a different ion. Remember how we talked about calcium being important for your heart in 231? Now you're catching on, right? Yes?
So is calcium equivalent to like reaching threshold? Or
Yes. Calcium would basically be the, I don't know if you can reach threshold with just a sodium, but I know it's the one to make you go above threshold. So I let sodium in and calcium in. Now I've depolarized or turned on my autorhythmic cell. So far so good?
So why doesn't it just use sodium?
I didn't build you.
I'm just curious.
I know why in the next cell why it uses calcium. I never heard anyone come out blatantly and say why you needed the first cell. Yes.
Is it the same in the brain? You said that you'll take calcium from bones for the brain and heart.
Yep. The same idea is if you run out of calcium, your heart can't do these steps and hearts begin to stop. Okay. So now let's predict number 3. So tell me to click a potassium channel. If this were a neuron, you'd say potassium channel would open, my potassium would go which way? Out, and my graph should go down. Hey, you learned so much last term. Exactly like a neuron. So we'll do step 3.
Except it doesn't hyperventilate.
It doesn't hyper. It can, it's not the norm, so we're going to skip that one. So on step 3, I'm going to open a potassium channel, and the potassium goes out of the cell. And the magic word for potassium going out, making a graph go down, is repolarization.
So a lot of stuff.
So step 2 is the oddball from last term. That calcium step is different. But we have depolarize, repolarize in the autorhythmic cell. Now, let's figure out now how we're going to get the contractile cells to hear this. Notice on this diagram we have an intercalated disc right here. That's what represents here. What do you notice inside an intercalated disc? What is that? It's a gap junction, a tube, a tunnel. What do you think is going to go in that tunnel? The calcium will. So let's do that. Oh, I lost my animation. Hold on. There we go. So now it says, go next. There we go. Click on the gap junction, intercalated disc, tunnel, tube, pick a word. Oh. So, some of the ions that were in step 1 and 2, some of them, not all of them, are going to go over and enter the contractile cell. So some sodium and some calcium will enter the contractile cell.
So that's like step 4.
You can make it a step 4, but I'm just going to leave it right there.
At the same time? Okay.
So once you've done your depolarization, some of those ions are going to cross the gap, we say, and go over to the contractile cell. That's how the contractile cell is going to hear the message to go. So we're going to put the contractile cell over here. So contractile cell. Don't like that word? Say muscle cell. I mean, that's what it is, right? It's a heart muscle cell.
And that's via the intercalated
Interligated disc or gap junction. Depending on who you read, they'll use different phrasing, but gap junction, interligated disc. All right, so now, once those have entered the cell, what's my cell going to do once all those sodiums and calciums come on in? Let's find out. Click a sodium channel. What do you think will happen in my click a sodium channel? Ooh, that looks remarkably similar. So, sodium channel opens. In my contractile cell, sodium comes in to my cell. Exactly the same as the autorhythmic cell. My graph went up. So far, so good. What do you think will be step 2? Take a guess.
Calcium channel.
Hey, there's a calcium channel. Click it. Oh, damn it. All right. That's not what you thought. Let's replay that, because it's important. So click the calcium channel, but watch what else occurs.
Oh.
Do that again. Yeah, so now we have a very bizarre step 2.
So is more calcium?
Yes, so the calcium channel opens, and that makes calcium come in, right? Do that again. But at the same time, another channel opens. What's the other channel?
The potassium.
All right, so put a big and in a square, means that happens at the same time, and the potassium channel opens. And potassium always goes where? Out. So in this cell, you're basically combining 2 and 3 from the prior cell. Calcium coming in, and simultaneously K going out. Let's look at that again. So calcium in, there's even some calcium that comes in from the other cell. Potassium out. So I want you to look at the graph, what it's pointing at. What does the graph do when something comes in and something comes out at the same time?
Down.
Yeah, it kind of stays flat, right? It doesn't go up or down. They call it a plateau.
Okay.
But it's basically not going up or down very much, not compared to initially. Yeah, even exchange, basically. Now I'll come back to haunt us why that is. Let me finish the animation. So now I'm related to my step 3 now. It says to click the potassium channel again. What do you think is going to happen when I click the potassium channel one more time? Let's find out. More potassium leaves. All right, so step 3, more potassium leaves. So now we have to give these some names. So let's go back. Back. All right, so here comes my signal from the autorhythmic cell. Now I'm going to open my sodium, and notice that depolarization. So we have a contractile cell, polarization. Step 1 is depolarization. Step 2, they called it the plateau.